liberal donors and the tragic display of cowardice. I saw this clip about liberal donors that made my head spin. Check this.
Teddy, I want to talk about your reporting that liberal donors are pulling donations because of fear of retribution.
What's good, free radicals? I'm Chaos, your angry empath straight from the front lines of the evolution, and I'm just being a ripple in the wave with today's chaos theory. What we're seeing from the liberal donor class today is a tragic display of cowardice. The stakes have never been higher, and yet the very people with the resources to defend democracy, protect economic prosperity, and preserve institutional dignity are hesitating. Liberal legislators, instead of leading with conviction, are comforting reluctant donors, making excuses for inaction rather than demanding they step up. I'm calling out both the donors and the weak approach of those who are supposed to finance the fight. Let's call it what it is. Wealth doesn't make you a leader. If you were a leader, you'd see the harm being done and feel compelled to protect, at least your interests. You'd recognize that this destruction is so widespread that soon there will be nothing left for your business to thrive on. Often you hear talk about how today's citizens lack conviction, toughness, and work ethic. But from my vantage point, that's exactly what we're seeing amongst liberal donors. Hey, pinheads, do you really think being passive with this much power in one man and his inner circle will stop at the federal demolition? The truth is, for businesses to succeed, they need an economic system where creativity, innovation, and hard work thrive. Instead, our nation has been pulled into a political and economic wasteland where these values are stifled. Decades of policies favoring the wealthiest on both sides have created a class of soft, short-sighted nimrods where toughness and conviction was before their time. Supporting a society that promotes democracy, economic opportunity, and dignity isn't charity, it's economic survival.
Of all the people that are actually in threat from the Trump administration right now, it's not a bunch of rich donors. And I do think that there has been this as being used as an excuse.
So, liberal legislators are begging big donors not to be afraid of Trump. Instead of confronting the threat head-on, they're pleading for funds, promising that their cautious approach will be enough to stop fascism. They are using the trust us without a plan, and tickling their feet strategy when boldness is required. So-called leaders should be tallying up the warriors and calling out the weak. Get a count of who among them is ready to fight for democracy, and who among them are spineless, waiting to see how much of their wealth and influence gets devoured before they wake up? Fun fact, you know who isn't wringing their hands, begging their donors for permission? Fascists. Yup. They are consolidating power, dismantling institutions, and eliminating opposition. And you want to wait and see what conditions will be like under unchecked authoritarian rule? Do you want to wait and see what your business, economic standing, and quality of life will look like after years of breathing in that toxic air?
Funny that you say this because I spent the last 4 days in San Francisco with a whole lot of wealthy people, and I kind of heard the same thing, or things like, well, listen, I'm not crazy about Elon Musk, but the government is too fat. Let's just see what happens.
Would our forefathers have waited to see what King George would do before declaring independence? Would Americans have waited to see if Japan and Germany would lose interest after Pearl Harbor? Would the U.S. have waited to see how the Russians would handle the space race or technological boom? And yet, here we are, at another defining moment where democracy itself is on the line. And some of our wealthiest allies are content to let authoritarian forces gain ground, hoping that this time they'll be spared. Listen, this is not about ideological disagreements. We are talking about people who have systematically hijacked the Constitution, eroded voting rights, pushed grandma, the sick, and veterans out on the streets, and are transferring the people's coffers into the hands of conservative oligarchs. Be damned the consequences. And yet, some in the liberal donor class choose to wait, to debate, to calculate risk instead of acting against clear and present danger. Let's be clear, Trump, Musk, and the corporate oligarchs aren't about eliminating waste and fraud. If that were the real concern, the strategy would be to hold legislators, Democrats, and Republicans accountable. The answer is not handing absolute power to those who have made it clear they will never give it back. To our liberal donor class, it's time to fish or cut bait. Yes, your wealth gives you a level of protection, for now. But power left unchecked never stops at its first target. The longer you hesitate, the greater the risk that you too will be next. If the forces of authoritarianism take root and destroy everything fair and just in America, do you really think your business will continue to prosper? Do you really believe you can go anywhere in the world and not be seen as a case study in cowardice? History will remember those who stood up when democracy was in peril, and it will never forget those who watched it burn while calculating their profit margins. Fish or cut bait. Greed doesn't overshadow humanity, one built on the pillars of AID. I'm Chaos. You can support this channel with your shares through Patreon or by hitting up our swag store. Sales support the cause. Peace